Youts, Ab Kilusunugwa. Hello, my name is Ab, and I'm back. Well, first of all, I was off on medical leave last month, so this is my second week back. I'm on the road to recovery. I'm healing very well, so things are good. And I'm also back again trying to do this live stream. I attempted to do this live stream at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I was broadcasting for about 40 minutes before I realized there was no sound. So I've taken care of that issue. Hopefully, I'm just going to check and see that things are okay, things are good. If you're in the chat, let me know if you can hear me. Or just say hi if you want to. So, yeah, we're off and running now. This is my second attempt at this third live stream. So I'm just checking the Facebook page here, just really quickly in case anybody has made any comments. So I'm on the main camera right here. Just wanted to tell you what I plan on doing in this live stream. I'm going to be doing a root word analysis, so I'll be sharing that with you very shortly. And I wanted to show you a web page that I've added to the xa'islak'ala website just recently. It's actually one that was on there before, but I removed it some time ago, and now I put it back. So we'll take a look at that website, or that web page on the website. So I just want to check on the stream and see that things are going okay. Looks like we're good. I'm seeing my face. I'm seeing my mouth moving. I think there's sound coming out through the stream, hopefully. And so I think what I'll do is I'll switch over to my, I have a Word document here that I wanted to share. So this is another root word analysis. So this word is go. And this is the first root word that has, that starts with these letters, go. And the meaning of this root word is pond, pool, puddle, or lake. And this is in the common root list of Wakashan dialects that was published by Lincoln and Rath in 1980. So it's entry number 2326 in that book. And I got this root word list from the Lincoln and Rath xa'islak'ala dictionary that was published in 1986. And this is on page 483. That's where all of these words are listed. So what I did from there is I basically wrote down all the words, and then I looked up the definitions of those words later on. So the first word is goe. Goe means calm water, and this is on page 318 of the Lincoln and Rath xa'islak'ala dictionary. The next word is goa tusala. Goa tusala. And this means a pool in the river with little current. So it's not a strong river. And this is also where the trout spawn. Also on page 318. Next we have gobua. Gobua means a pool below the waterfall. Also on page 318. Next up is gos. Gos. There are two plural forms. There's gos, gos, and there's also gohkwas. Gohkwas. And this refers to a puddle, a pond, a lake on the ground outside. This one is on page 319. Next we have gohwas. K'ohwas refers to bilge water on page 320. The next word is k'ojua. K'ojua means a board that is covered with water, puddle on a board, also on page 320. Next up is k'ojueth. K'ojueth. There's actually two ways of saying this. You could also say k'ojuith. K'ojuith. So either of those pronunciations is acceptable, and this refers to a board or table indoors which is covered with a puddle. And this is on page 320. Next up is k'ojuals. K'ojuals. And again, we have an alternate pronunciation, and this is k'oju'ls. K'oju'ls. And this refers to a puddle outside. Also on page 320. Up next is k'owa. K'owa means a puddle on a rock or on the stove. Page 320. Next up we have k'owith. K'owith. And this is a puddle on the floor. So something that I do when I'm doing these root word analyses, since I know that k'o means a puddle or a pond, what I would then look at is this suffix. This eth, I can look at, and I know that it has to do with something being indoors. So if I were guessing, if I didn't already know what k'oith means, I would probably say that it means a puddle inside, a body of water inside. So specifically, this means a puddle on the floor. So a floor is inside a house or a building. You also see it here. K'oju'ith. K'oju'ith. K'owith. They both have to do with a puddle indoors. And that's signified by this I and tilde L, eth. And the last word is k'ois. K'ois is singular. There are two plural forms. You can say k'ois, k'ois, or you could say k'ois, k'ois. Either way is fine. There are just two different ways of saying k'ois in plural form. So this refers to a pond or pool on the beach or by the riverside. This is also a place name. So there is a place further down the channel in Isla territory that is called k'ois. I'm not sure where that is exactly, but I know that it's somewhere down the channel. And so that's a place name. And it's also a description of a pond or pool on the beach or by the riverside. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my web browser. I'm going to do a little bit of shifting around here. So this is a web page that, as I mentioned, was on the website for a while, and then I took it down, partly because I've added so much to this website that, if you've never managed a website before, the way I have this one set up is that I have pages, which are basically like blog articles or posts are blog articles. Pages are static pages. So they're dedicated web pages to a certain subject. A blog post is a little bit different, where it gets automatically uploaded to the website. It basically, the website creates a URL address for it. It does that automatically and adds it to the website. So those are posts. And pages are different because they're static pages. So when I write a page, what I have to do is, when I publish it, I have to manually add it to the menu. And right now the menu is like really long. So there are many, many static pages that I've added to this website over the years. So it gets to be a lot of like scrolling up to try and find the right place to put something. But that's the difference between a post and a page. This is a page, so it requires me to manually add this to the menu. So this is on the xa'islak'ala website. So this is under resources. So this is the menu here. If you hover over resources, you see a bunch of different entries. So if you go down to the very bottom, that's this web page here. If you click on it, it brings you to this page here, which talks about HTML symbols. I could also call them Unicode symbols. So basically, HTML is a code, and it's how web pages are written. When you're looking at a web page here, this all appears in HTML code in some form somewhere. I use a visual editor, so basically what I see when I write here on the page ends up exactly as you see it. The only HTML coding that I did was actually to change the font. And that's basically all the coding that I did. So these are HTML symbols. They could also be referred to as Unicode. Unicode basically means it can be shared anywhere on any web page or on different in different programs. And it should appear the same way. There might be differences depending on what program you're using. But I'll just read out what I've written here at the top of the page. So this is a list of symbols used in various isla orthographies. These are in Unicode format, so you should be able to post them on websites. So you can copy and paste these symbols and post them on websites or on Facebook or in Microsoft Word. Anything like that. Any character that you need can be copied and pasted from here. Times New Roman is the optimal font for all isla orthographies, and this is because it renders all of the symbols properly. So if you're using a different font like Arial or Verdana or Tahoma, chances are some of these special symbols will not show up properly. Like these symbols, these letters with the lines over top of them, in different fonts, they tend to not show up properly. They might not even show up at all. So some fonts are not able to render these special symbols properly. So other fonts might show them in unusual ways or might not show them at all. So just keep that in mind. So that's why I changed the font on this specific webpage to Times New Roman. So I'm going to talk about different linguists and the different symbols that they used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you can get a better look at these symbols. So I started off with M. Bach. He was actually the last linguist that worked with the isla language. And in isla writing, there's different ways of signifying where you place stress in a word. So in M. Bach's second orthography, he actually developed two writing systems. His second orthography is where he used what in linguistics we call acute accent marks. So this first symbol is what I call an acute A. So it's a regular letter A, but it has kind of a slanted dash on top of it. Pay attention to which direction the dash is pointing to. It's pointing to the right. So that's what tells us it's an acute accent. If the accent mark is facing the opposite direction, if it's facing to the left, that's a different accent. So we specifically use the acute accent in the hybrid orthography, and Bach specifically used the acute accent in his second orthography. So something to keep in mind is that acute accent symbols only go over vowels. So you notice there's an accented A, so A is a vowel. There's an accented E, so E is a vowel. An acute I, so I is a vowel. And you'll also notice that the I does not have a dot over top of it. So the acute accent has actually replaced the dot. So it's something that's very unique here. So an acute I, lowercase I, missing the dot, but it has the acute accent over top of it instead. And we have a U with the acute accent on top of it. So this is an acute U. So again, keep in mind, this is something that's going to be very helpful for you when learning the orthography. Vowels only go over, or accent symbols only go over vowels. That's important to keep in mind. There's vowels and there's consonants. So it's very helpful to understand the differences between those. So acute accents go over some vowels. Not every vowel will have them. And also, one thing I should point out is that acute accents will appear in words that have more than one syllable. So if a word has 2 syllables or more, or 3 or 4, it will have an acute accent wherever the emphasis is placed. If the word only has 1 syllable, there's no acute accent. There will be none. Because the pitch of your voice is not going to change. Whereas in a multi-syllable word, your voice is going to be raising and lowering depending on where the accent goes. And that's where these accented vowels come in handy. They tell us where to place emphasis on a word. So if you think of the English word emphasis, I'm emphasizing the first syllable. So if we were to write emphasis with the isla hybrid orthography, we would actually use this symbol. We would use an acute E followed by an M. So that would tell us that we're placing stress on EM, which is at the beginning of the word. So we're starting at a high tone, and the rest of the word is going to be at a lower tone. Emphasis. We also have letters that appear with little lines over top of them. So a straight line over top of a G is called a G bar. That's what I call them. It's just basically a deeper G sound. So it sounds kind of like G, G. And then an X bar is a deeper X sound, which is more like H, H. Whenever there is an apostrophe over top of a consonant, it changes the sound of that consonant. So it either makes it ejective, which means it's more forceful, or it'll turn it into what we call a glottalized consonant, which indicates that there's basically like a short pause in front of the letter. So you have glottalized C. So this is different than a regular C. A regular C sounds like t. It's a bit of a softer sound. When you put an apostrophe on top of a C, it becomes t. So if you pronounce them one after one after another. T, 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 t. You should be able to hear that the glottalized C is a sharper sound. So we have a glottalized C, glottalized K, L, M, N, P, Q, T, W, and Y. So the apostrophe over top of these letters changes the sound of that letter in some way. It either makes it more forceful or it creates a short pause in front of it. So these are all the glottalized symbols that represent the glottalized sounds in xa'islak'ala. And there are also regular counterparts for these. So there's a regular C, and then there's a glottalized C. A regular K, and then there's a glottalized K, and so on and so forth. There's also a raised W, so it's a small W that's up higher than the rest of the letters. So I would not advise using this symbol by itself if you're going to copy and paste it. I would use the full combination. So here we have what's called a rounded G. So it's a regular G followed by a small raised W. So what this tells us is that we're going to make a G sound, but before we even do that, we're going to prepare by rounding our lips. So it's gua, gua. So if you think of English, you can think of a word like language. Language. So if you watch closely, I'm rounding on my lips before I pronounce the G. Language. Language. And in xa'islak'ala, a word that you can use as an example is guaso. Guaso, which means pig. So it's a rounded G sound. Gua. There's also a rounded K, a rounded Q, and a rounded X. We also have a couple of these combinations that have an apostrophe over top of the consonant, the main consonant. So this first one is a rounded glottalized K. So it's a rounded K, a letter K followed by a small raised W, and it also has an apostrophe. So this is kwa, kwa. And there's also a rounded glottalized Q, kwa, kwa. It's a slightly deeper sound. Up here we saw the G bar and the X bar. Sometimes they appear by themselves. Sometimes they themselves are also rounded. So we have a rounded G bar here, hua, and a rounded X bar, hua. It's also very important to realize that there is a specific apostrophe that is used in the hybrid orthography. So we use an apostrophe that looks like this. It looks like the number 9, as opposed to this one here, which is facing downward. This one looks like a 6. We do not use this one in the hybrid orthography. We use this one. Sometimes it's referred to as a right single quote. But what I tell people is to use the apostrophe that looks like the number 9, and not the one that looks like the number 6. So this is Emmett Bach's second orthography. This is the one he started using later. His first orthography, his older one, was different in the way that he signified accent placement. So he used what I call a straight apostrophe in his first writing system. So what I've written here is this is what he used in his early work to signify an accent. Later, he started using an acute accent mark. So this is an example of his first orthography, where the accent is signified by this straight apostrophe, and it comes after the vowel that is being emphasized. I personally find it a little disruptive to have this symbol kind of in the middle, and I prefer what he did later on in his second orthography, where he placed an acute accent over the vowel. So this is dukwala, which means to see. So these are both pronounced exactly the same way. The difference is in how Emmenbach signified stress in the word, how he chose to show where the accent goes in the word. Before Emmenbach started working with the isla language, it was Lincoln and Rath. Their orthography was a little bit different. They used some of the same symbols that Emmenbach would later use, but some of them were different. And you can see one of them here. This is what's called a tilted L, and this makes a sound. And Emmenbach represented this sound with an L and an H. So he used two consonants, two symbols to represent one sound, whereas Lincoln and Rath used one symbol to represent one sound, which is a common practice in linguistics. They also used a symbol called the lambda, and Emmenbach signified this with the letters DL, and this makes kind of a dl sound. If you take that lambda and put a line through the middle of it, it becomes a barred lambda, which is what Lincoln and Rath used. Emmenbach used the letters TL, and it makes a k sound. K. And if you take that same combination and add an apostrophe on top, it becomes a barred ejective lambda. So this was a little tricky in Emmenbach's orthographies. He either used a T and an apostrophe afterwards and an L, or he put the apostrophe on top of the T and then followed it with an L. Whereas Lincoln and Rath used one symbol, basically, to represent that sound. They also used what we refer to as a syllabic L. This is represented by an E and an L in Emmenbach's orthographies. And the way that Lincoln and Rath signified this was to use an L with a small dash underneath it. So it's not a dot. You probably can't see it that well on your screen. It's actually a really short dash. It's a straight line underneath the L. This is a syllabic L, signified by the letters EM in Emmenbach. And there's also a syllabic N in Lincoln and Rath, which was represented by the letters EN in Emmenbach's orthography. There's also, I'm not sure how to refer to this. I call it either a G Karen or a Karen G. So this pointed line over top of the G is called a Karen. It's the same as the straight line that was used by Emmenbach over top of the G. So this is basically an alternate form of a G bar. So it has that slanted or a pointed line on top of it instead of a straight line. There's also an X Karen or a Karen X. It's the same as the X bar in Emmenbach's orthography and the hybrid orthography, which is used now. And then we go back to the beginning. The first linguist that worked with the isla language and developed a writing system for it was Hein Vink. And he used a small raised W, or a small raised O. It's basically like the degree symbol. And this is the same as the small raised W that appears in the Lincoln and Rath orthography and Emmenbach and also now the hybrid orthography. It just represents a rounded consonant. And something that's very unique is he used an umlaut over the letter A. So this represents the sound eh, like in ne, which is snow, or lalagwade, which is butterfly. So this symbol was replaced by AI in Lincoln and Rath, in Emmenbach, and in the Hayward orthography. So if you see these symbols, you know it's Hein Vink, and this was his second writing system. He actually had 3. This was orthography number 2, where he used the degree symbol, or the small raised O, and the umlaut A. There's also some other symbols. The schwa, it's kind of an upside down E. This appears in IPA. So this is the International Phonetic Alphabet. This exists in the Isla orthographies, but it's just a regular E instead of an upside down one. But that's what it's called. It's called a schwa. There's also a square root that appears in the root word analysis that I did earlier in this live stream. So this is used to show root words, and this was only in the Lincoln and Rath dictionary. So an example here is we have the root symbol, and then you have book. A book is a root word meaning human. So this symbol represents that book is a root word. If we add the letters AI, it then becomes beque. Beque means body. So you're taking the root word, book, you're adding a suffix, e, and you end up with beque. So that's basically how words are built in xa'islak'ala. There's also variations of the tilde L, or the barred L. They're not used in any other Isla orthographies, with the exception of Hein Vink's third orthography. But his third orthography is not really official. It doesn't appear in any classes or learning documents that he developed. Didn't appear in any dictionaries. He used it in a research article. So it's kind of unofficial. But other than that, you're not going to see any other variations used in any other Isla orthography. But you will see this in other languages. So this might be of interest for you to know. So there's the barred L, which has a slanted line going through the L. This is actually the one that Hein Vink used in his third unofficial orthography. Then there's the barred L that has a straight line. So pretty straightforward. It's a lowercase l with a straight line going through the middle of it. And then there's the belted L, or looped L. So it's an L with a looped line going through it. So those are variations that you might see of the barred L. And you'll see them in other languages. You might see them in xa'islak'ala, which is the Bella Bella dialect. You might see them in Navajo. They also have that sound. So they might use one of these symbols. They might use the slanted line going through the L. They might use the straight line going through the L. So it's helpful to know these, because this is knowledge that is, you can apply this to other languages. So that's something that is, it comes in very handy when you're learning other languages. If you see this, if you see a lowercase l with a line going through it in some way, then you know, oh, that's a, you'll know that automatically. So yeah, it's this knowledge can transfer over to other languages. So I find that to be very helpful. So I'm going to change back to my webcam here. I'm going to take a quick look at the stream. And I'm not seeing any questions here in the chat. So that's it for this second attempt at the this live stream today. So thank you for your patience. If you were watching the first attempt at doing this live stream today. I apologize for that. I didn't realize that there was no sound. So I restarted. I did it over again. So Languathlina. I'm finished now. Until next time, remember, learning is its own reward. Exquiguelas.